I was like getting the best work done I've gotten all day. Like, to be honest.
You're so awesome. All right, we are ready to go. Here we are. We have made it to the last Tuesday of September 29th. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yes, it is September 29th. On Tuesday at 4 o'clock. This is the Offsite Construction Series. We meet the second Tuesday and the last Tuesday of the month to discuss exciting things that are going on in the offsite construction world with some of the most amazing experts in the industry. So thank you all for being here. First and foremost, we have these amazing partners that made this special, and we are going to be introducing them. The first one is Mountain View Window and Door, and I would love to have Matt, please let us know your position at the company and give us a little overview as to what you offer.
I'm just a guy at Mountain View Window and Door. It happens to be general manager, but we provide doors and windows for stick-built and off-site construction projects. We've got some projects going on of our own, and so we're very familiar with the issues that off-site construction experiences. If anybody is doing any off-site projects, please come talk to us. We lead with Andersen. We also carry big doors with the Andersen series, La Cantina, Western, Centaur, and Weiland. So thanks.
Very exciting. I love that you're finally telling us a little bit more about the doors than just the windows. It's exciting to hear this.
You need both.
Yes, you do it all. We want to thank one of our partners, which is 303 Development. 303 Development has been crucial in all of Modular Sure Site's projects. Greg Crom is the president of 303 Development. They are a Denver Metro general contractor with 20 years of experience in remodeling, multifamily, commercial, and high-end custom homes. So thank you, 303 Development, for being one of our partners. Our next partner is Urbaneer. If you don't know Urbaneer Living, you should check them out. They are expanding very quickly across the country. I am actually assisting and helping their whole development program. I am actually just named a couple months ago their director of new business development for the national presence. So they have units that are about 500 square feet that live a little bit more than 800 with the optimization of their components. They have a movable wall system. They have a bed and kitchen systems that are these usual and unique components that are in offsite construction. So we love working with them. Our next partner is Art of Construction, and we actually have the guy here in that picture, Devin Tilley. Devin, take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, I was totally stoked, and to see some of these cool people I've got to meet over the years, like the Fading West guys, and excited to meet more of you. So I'm the visionary founder of the Art of Construction, which I started our global Megaphone podcast going 4 years ago, and we're closing in on our 200th episode. And my passions are all about getting rid of crusty contractor and breaking down the construction silos. And our whole platform is all about connecting the right projects through the right technologies and system-built lifestyle to the right projects. So we have podcasts where we do fireside chats and deep dive series like you see on the screen. But one of our, we've been putting a lot of work behind the scenes with our Art of Construction architectural projects. So Scott, maybe you can talk about a little bit about what we got going on showcasing the modular stuff that we're all passionate about on this call.
Thanks, Devin. So yeah, as Devin said, we got some architectural projects of our own that we're working on right now. And I'm happy to say that we got an entire video series coming soon on blending offsite and on-site construction, all the way from the manufacturing phase, all the way to the last nail, the last crane at the job site, and showing all the nitty-gritty details in between, straight from people within the industry who are actually making it happen. So stay tuned, check out our website, our social media, or contact one of us on a private message during this call. We'll make sure you guys see these videos. We're really trying to rebrand the entire way that offsite is thought of in this industry, along with this great series that Audrey puts on. So go ahead and check us out, and we're excited to see what Amy has to say today.
Super cool. I'm excited to see that too. I love that we are starting to integrate and educate people more in this area. And this is really what Amy is all about. Amy, I'm going to actually let you know a little bit more about Amy. Before joining Autodesk, Amy Marks was the CEO of XSite Modular and pioneered a path to becoming the world's prominent and premier prefabrication consultant, and is often called the Queen of Fab. I always like hashtagging her that because I don't know any other woman that does what she does. Literally creating a role as the first prefabrication consultant, Amy defines the language and process that is adapted by companies, countries, and builders around the world to enable prefabrication. Amy champions the use of optimized prefabrication across many building types, including high-tech, healthcare, hospitality, data centers, residential, and commercial buildings. She has strong relationships across the world with many owners, architects, and engineers, and the supply chain partners. She is a unique and outspoken agent for the change that is well respected across many industries and is highly sought after as a keynote speaker and chairperson on the Conference of Prefabrication. She is the chairperson and ambassador for Advancing Prefabrication Show, which is one of the largest, most innovative of its kind events, of which is how I met Amy. I actually went up to her and got to meet her in Dallas last February, which was super exciting for me. Amy Marks is committed to using her extensive experience, thought leadership, and high profile within the construction industry to promote participation, innovation, and the advancement across all industry segments. She brings critical attention to attracting a diverse talent pool and tirelessly educates about inclusion issues as a means to bring new perspectives and skill sets into the industry. She is a passionate speaker on improving business results through the increased diversity in thought and is often quoted as saying, "I'm not a feminist, I'm a capitalist." She is a graduate of the University of Florida and is the alum of Harvard Business School. And she is the mom to a daughter that is so adorable. Her name is Mckinsey and is also an avid sports fan, having played competitive rugby for almost 15 years. So welcome, Amy. We are so excited for you to take your time out of your busy day, and I know it's busy, to be here with us. So thank you for allowing us, your presentation day and being here for us.
Yeah, no worries. Hopefully you're recording from a couple of my friends that might want to join. I see we are. That's great. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I did this right. Let's see. Going to my PowerPoint. You see my presentation or my notes? Let's see.
See your notes.
You'll want to swap.
Let's swap it. Here we go. That's what happens when you have like a whole multiple screen situation. My life is like a television studio now. I have to say, to be honest, it's a little crazy.
Well, that looks great.
Thanks. I'm glad. It's go Gators. That's right, Fading West. So, okay, fantastic. I would only do this because it's Audrey, for the record. I think, she's so amazing, and what she's doing in the industry is so good. We should really all follow her lead because change starts with one. It really does, and she's putting her money where her mouth is. So a little bit about me, and Audrey said a couple of people didn't really know me very well anymore because I don't actually go to the MBI events, to be honest, really that often. I'm not really, it's not my thing, for the record. So, but I grew up in the business. I used to be the CEO of XSite Modular. Let me back up a little bit. I was in conventional construction for a long time in New York. I bought, as a minority shareholder, a volumetric steel and concrete modular manufacturer that most of you knew. It was called Coleman, and back in the day, and I was there and did the acquisition, located the company for the acquisition, did CMO, CRO, like a variety of roles up to the president, and then started XSite like about 12 years ago because I felt like every time I was holding a hammer, I was like looking at problems, I was holding a hammer. So I made every problem look like a nail. And so went on and started XSite, which was the world's real first prefabrication consultancy, and made a lot of people feel uncomfortable for a long time, including most of the guys in the modular world, which is great. And I would say maybe, almost a couple of years ago, Autodesk and I started talking and decided to come over and join Autodesk and put my design build data center company on the side to work with blocks at the moment. It's there. And my consultancy I've shelved up there with my AFL ball. And for a minute, But I literally worked with guys like the Singapore government for many years, or big end users. And I know Intel has spoken about that at our conferences, so it's not a secret. Big general contractors and a lot of the manufacturers. So I just want to give you like my warning. All right, everyone should like almost like take the oath, hold up your hand. This conversation is going to make you very uncomfortable. It's not going to be fun in some ways. It's almost like I live by the edict: the harder the truth to tell, the truer the friend that will tell it to you. So many of you will not like what I have to say, but it's a point of view, and it's my point of view, and maybe some others. But it's a point of view, whether you like it or not. It's come from about 20 years of experience almost in the space, and beyond that in construction, and a 360-degree view from owners and governments and architects and engineers. I work for all of them, and I've been a manufacturer. So you might not like it. It's going to be uncomfortable, but like, at least you'll be getting the truth. How's that? Does that make sense?
That's awesome. That's exactly
All okay with that?
Here.
Okay, good. So I get very frustrated with language. You'll find about me. I'm a very verbal person, and I'm a verbal learner. So a lot of times I tell my teams, I repeat myself. It's not so much I'm doing it for you. Oftentimes I'm doing it for myself. And so like, you'll hear me say things over and over again because I'm honing the words down to be the right words. And in this space, this ecosystem we call our world, I'm very confused because most people speak in the language that's not a language I'm familiar with, or they use a bunch of these words and at one time in a sentence, and I'm like, I don't really know what they just said. And so like it's my fault that word offsite's up there. I brought it to the US from the UK, and that's why XSite was named XSite. But in reality, if any of you have seen the Mace project at the top of the skyscraper where they're doing fabrication up the top, prefabrication on site, even in the UK, you can't call it offsite anymore when you're doing prefabrication on site. So there's, to me, on-site and off-site is now just basically location-specific prefabrication, right? So it's like, it's just prefabrication, on-site or off-site. We'll go through some of these other things and these other words. I'll give you some definitions today, but you'll see that I'm a stickler for language. So if you ask me some questions, I'll be like, I don't know what that means. Like, say it to me differently. And I don't want to say mine's the only language, but it's a widely adopted language around the world. And there's other weird words people love to put in because they think that everything should be new. But these are the words that I like. These are the words I've used for about 15 years at this point. And they evolve. And I have evolved my own language over time. And I'm open to like it continually improving, but we can have a discussion about it. My title on purpose is Industrialized Construction. Many of you know that I ran the Modern Methods of Construction LinkedIn group, and it's still called that for many years. I never really liked that term, although it was like used in Europe, but I felt like every time I said the word modern, it was old. Like before it came out of my mouth, it was like the second I said it, it sounded old, right? And so this is like this definition has actually been around for a long time. There's some problems with it at the moment that I'm going to try to fix, but I like the term industrialized construction, and it's the application of manufacturing techniques to the built environment. That doesn't just mean construction. It means to the design, build, operate environment. I'm coming up with a little bit of an evolution of this terminology because even my designers, then the second I say industrialized construction, they think it has nothing to do with them. And I'm like, wait a minute, we got to talk about this. So for the moment, I'm the head of industrialized construction strategy and evangelism. My job, by the way, at Autodesk, which we didn't talk too much about, I informed the company strategy on industrialized construction, the individual product strategy across the product portfolio and our platform at Autodesk. Our platform have integrated our portfolio and other people's. And then I work with our customers to help them on their strategy with industrialized construction, and from everything from like the consulting with those companies to product builds and workflows and all that stuff. And then obviously the word evangelism means I just go out and talk all the time, and I've got evangelists that work underneath me for different types of technology that we include in the industrialized construction world. So let's talk about what that world looks like for industrialized construction. In my mind at the moment, good enough for now, right? Like getting improved, but I call this the house that I see built. And at the foundation of that, you've got technology enablers like the Internet of Things and big data and analytics. We're a data-driven company at Autodesk. The cloud, so for those of you who know our Autodesk Construction Cloud products, the resiliency you get from being in the cloud, the safety and security, especially during COVID, many of these projects would have stopped had we a couple of years at Autodesk not invested in the cloud, being able to work from home and being able to pivot to do that when they could, right? And then I think about process enablers like lean manufacturing. I just had a meeting with lean, the LCI today. I'm not saying lean construction because I'm saying on purpose lean manufacturing. There's some clunkiness to some of the tools that we're working out with them right now, where it's very trade specific. It's very like, it's almost like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's like if you ask a bunch of construction guys to take a manufacturing idea and focus it on what they're doing, they of course focused it on the construction side of the business. We sort of lost the manufacturing and the lean manufacturing world for LCI, and it became this like pool planning and percent plan completes, and they kind of forgot like, wait, we should really actually be talking about some manufacturing here, like multi-trade and stuff like that. So it's an ongoing evolution. I think even in lean the Lean Construction Institute's a great group, and I think they're open to evolving some of these tools that are very trade centric, and that's a good thing, right? But we need to really bring the manufacturing back into the lean manufacturing conversation. Building information modeling, there was an evangelist, his name was Phil Bernstein. People know him as the father of BIM, building information modeling. Going multi-dimensional and understanding the connection of the data in the model itself. And so he worked for Autodesk. And when I came to work for Autodesk, my boss said, like, you're going to be the Phil Bernstein of IC. And I said, well, that's great, except BIM ended up having Revit, which is like they call it a hero product in software. And I'm like, that's not the case with IC. There is no hero product for this. This is a much bigger conversation. And BIM, connecting that information between the products and many products is, and really having functional data that's multi-dimensional is such a big part of that enabler. And then design for manufacturing and assembly, one of the most misused terms, I think, on the planet, and especially even from people in the space. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll talk in depth about the prefabrication continuum next, but there are some advanced building techniques like robotics and automation that we can apply to building some of those things on the continuum. And so this is like, for now, a good way of like sort of parsing out and bucketing some of those words, right? For industrialized construction. So years ago, before there was a thing called the Offsite show, I kept talking about pieces and parts at MBI, and they were like, we're talking about boxes here. And I was like, well, it's not just about boxes. And so raise your hands, because I could see most of you on my screen. How many of you are in the box business, or in the I sell to the box guys business when I think about prefabrication? Just, you can wave, you can wink, you can do something or nothing. You sell doors. Is it to everybody? Saw kind of a little bit of the window. I love Fading West. Thank you. Like, it used to be like everyone wanted to talk about the fact they were in the box business. Now people are not sure, because I just called it the box business, right? And so there's no hierarchy. I have an issue with people talking about prefabrication as if it's a hierarchy. It's like the module being at the top of the pyramid. That's just not true. It's not the right application for many things. It starts really for me at advanced building products. That one in particular, I love. I've been showing it for years. It's blaze frame. It's actually intumescent tape on track. Right? Zip board's another one. Victolic piping is another advanced building product. Things that reduce drying time, curing time, hot work, anything that increases the flow on a project and allows things to move faster, and usually using less labor. Here's a hint. Usually those products are slightly more expensive than their dumb counterparts. And so you can't just be like, is blaze frame more expensive than fire caulk and track? And the answer is, of course it is, but you don't have the messy fire caulk and the wet and the dirty and the half-used tube, and then it gets thrown in the garbage. No one knows how to cost any of that. So they just ask the dumb first cost question. And the reality is we need to think about flow when we think about prefabrication. And that's a lean manufacturing thing as well. We need to think about how to make these job sites easier. Advanced building products, a really big part of the ecosystem, and we need to do more of that, right? Single trade assemblies, those have been happening for many years, almost in spite of the general contractor and architect. And those are things like electrical prefab, where they're doing things like whips, or this conduit that you see here, or spool pipes, or framed walls that are just single trade. But the name kind of explains itself, right? It's a single trade assembly that's done prefabricated and then put into place. Multi-trade assemblies, these get a little bit more complicated, and these are either volumetric or non-volumetric, meaning that bathroom pod I see there is a volumetric multi-trade assembly. I can stand in it, but it isn't the building. It's not the structure of the building, even though it has structure in it. And then there are non-volumetric multi-trade assemblies like risers or racks or skids or things like that. And then there are modules. And that module I'm showing, I think, is from 2007. I probably should update my pictures. I feel like it's nostalgic for me. I keep using the same photos, but that one happens to be a steel and concrete module. There are things like CLT modules. There are, you know, light gauge modules in totality. There are full concrete modules. It doesn't really matter. But again, this is a toolbox. And so that volumetric mod doesn't sit up top because, quite frankly, like, depending on what's in it and how far it's shipping a lot of expensive air. So if you make boxes, they probably don't go very far unless there's a reason. Like, unless you have a lot of MEP, like I used to make small little itty bitty data centers. They're very expensive on a per square meter basis, right? Those ship a lot further than housing or hotels or anything medical office buildings that are modules. There's just not a lot in it. They ain't going that far. That's the answer, right? Unless it's like some crazy site constraint, the only way they could get it in there. And like, I don't know, we talk a lot about all these asterisk jobs. And, you know, I used to use my own examples. Like I built data centers that were dropped out of airplanes. I don't want to do it every day. And it's certainly not a standard product, but I don't even know why we talked about it at that point, other than the fact that we were celebrating we could make it happen. But we have to really think of this as a toolbox with lots of tools in it and like talk about the words correctly. You've probably, I'm thinking, all seen this next, which is this new McKinsey report that came out actually in June. Shake your head if you've seen this before. I feel like we're gonna be sick of this chart in like 3 minutes for the next 15 years, although I think it's gonna change anyway fairly quickly. But what they said, which is great for all of us, is that 45% of the AEC value is gonna shift away from traditional processes, right? It's gonna shift towards prefabrication as being the main shift. And what they mean by that is, going back to the slide, are these two things right here. Single and multi-trade prefab. They don't mean this box. That's the part we should be aware of if you're in the box business, right? They're talking about prefabrication, which are pieces and parts. And they're talking about moving the processes to design for manufacturing and assembly and some manufacturing. And so we have to really think about that. There's a difference for how the growth in this ecosystem is going to happen. Now, I don't think that's forever. But, you know, there's the Construction Innovation Hub that's saying that growth is not, this yellow is full volumetric mods. This are pieces and parts, single trade, multi-trade. That's where a lot of this growth is going to come from. I don't think they have it exactly right, and here's why. The reason they're not showing a huge growth in the box business is the guys that build boxes are kind of quirky right now, right? For the most part, they're not part of giant companies. They're not, I don't care who they are, what they call themselves. For the most part, they're part of these quirky little companies, for the most part. When the guys that are building pieces and parts start recognizing how good they get at building pieces and parts, there's not that much of a leap from a full, you know, skid to volumetric modules. And the thing that they have going for them is that they'll keep moving up on the continuum, learning things, but it'll be guys that are like either general contractors that are vertically integrated, or you'll see guys like Aidan Kavanaugh, who's on here, one of my favorite people in the world, who does amazing MEP mods. And one day someone's gonna be like, can you do 5 stories of that? And he's gonna be like, yeah, of course, because I do everything else and no problem. And he'll end up, these guys will morph into doing more and more volumetric boxes, multi-story up through high rise at some point. And then you'll see it change. Then that's when the shift in percentages, but it won't be the guys we have now. So that you gotta know. It's gonna be the guys that all these general contractors and developers trust and all these, it just, that's the way it goes. This is an ecosystem that you have to affect change with a lot of different stakeholders, and it kind of happens from the top. How many of you heard disruptive technology a million times every time we talk about this, and sold that and told people that's why we're here, Andrew, right? That's why you say, I'm a disruptor, right? Like, the problem is this. So Clayton Christensen wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. That's where that word actually comes from, his language. And he was talking about like how one technology replaces another, like Uber and the taxi drivers, like one industry can replace, you can make change in an industry. The problem is that we're not an industry. We have to stop saying that. We are actually, and I'm writing a book called The Innovator's Deception, because we're fooled by the fact that we can chip away at the bottom. We're going to make huge, unbelievable change at this. How many of you have looked at the volumetric modular housing market in the world? It's been around a really long time. It hasn't chipped away at much, right? Like if you look at the percentages of 100% of the homes that are built, and you look at what's volumetric, it's still tiny. So the only way you're going to affect change, which is why this will shift, is you'll see change from the top down. You'll see the big serial owners, which we'll talk about later. You'll see the big general contractor. It's going to happen from them. So if you're one of these little guys, if I were you, I'd get some really good IP real quickly, because your exit strategy is to basically be bought by one of them. So just so you know, that should be in your mind. If you don't know those two words, exit strategy, learn those. And you better have some tech that goes along with it and not some just process stuff, right? So that's the hard truth. Hate to tell you. And by the way, I've said to multi-billion-dollar companies, you're too small to change the world. This week alone, at least 2 of them. So like, you just can't. Like, it's a lot more than just being disruptive and having some cool tech, right? So, and here's one of the reasons why we all talk about this, I think, irresponsibly. So if I could teach you one thing tonight, maybe this is the second most important thing. There's one other one. We've lived in a cash for chaos situation for a long time in this ecosystem. I remember 15 years ago, I said to a guy that was at my show, Audrey took a photo of us, don't tell anybody who it was. And I said, I'm going to teach you how to do more with less people on site so that like you can do more volume and have less people. And 15 years ago, he said, what the hell would I want to do that for? That's where I make all my money. Like every time there's like a lack of information or a silo between us, he didn't say the word silo, but anytime that like nobody knows the answer, they're just sitting out there getting paid. It's like, why would I want to do that? The more people I can shove on that job site and get paid general conditions, the better. This is an actual answer from one of the tier 1 contractors 15 years ago. So that's changing now. People want certainty. We have all these other things that people show, the productivity lag, and we have no skilled labor, and we have slow to digitize. By the way, it's not that we don't want to digitize. It's just we spend all our money on contingency, so we never shift that up front to R&D, right? It's like we have the money to spend on it, we just don't. But what we tell you about prefabrication is like, we're going to be faster, we're going to be cheaper. And I fight even with Autodesk at that messaging. An example is an example, but at the end of the day, we just want certainty. That's it. I don't care what the cost is or the schedule. We need certainty. This is a lean construction chart. And I was just talking to them about this today. It's one of my favorite charts ever made. These were in orange, typical projects that were big capital projects. And in blue, these are the best projects ever, the AECO group said when they were ranking all their big capital projects. Typical projects, right? 49% over budget, 61% late. What am I trying to be better than? Less late, less over budget? On time, on budget seems just fine if you're 61% of the time behind schedule. I'm just saying, people. Like, I'd be happy to be late 30% of the time, right? Like, but I'm shooting for like just on time. And then even more shocking, best projects ever in blue, 17% of them were over budget and 21% of them were late. Some group got together, some architect, engineer, contractor, and owner were like, this was our best project ever. 21% were them were behind schedule. Best project ever. And I'm like, why do I have to be faster? Why do I have to be cheaper? I just want to be, by the way, being early is not good either for jobs. Like, they're not ready to go in. There's lots of costs if you can't mobilize. We should stop selling this nonsense of, and by the way, some of them are from my projects that people took the numbers of a case study and applied it to the entirety of the industry, right? Aiden does a lot of high-tech stuff. What he saves on a project by adding concurrency of lots of complicated systems, you can't get in housing. There's not enough in it. You can't make that savings leap from something very high-tech to something very simple. It just doesn't work. And here's the kicker, guys. If it takes you 3 times as long to design it and twice as long to put it in on site, you just blew your advantage. Our problem is it takes us 3 times as long typically to design stuff. So like you can't say we're faster for the most part. We haven't quite gotten the DFMA part of this down. So I just want everyone to recognize that these are our challenges, right? And who's actually the early adopters that are changing that cash for chaos mentality? Number 1 group, the serial owners. The guys that are the Facebooks, the Googles, you know, the Marriotts, the AstraZenecas, the people that actually have a global program that want a playbook where they don't put in the hands of just the architect and engineer anymore and the contractor like, hey, I need this building. You guys should design and build it. It's like, no, I want these pieces and parts from these supply chain partners. That's my playbook. Go and buy those, right? So they're decoupling lots of these complicated bits of the building and they're coming up with prefabricated elements, right, that you saw on that continuum, and they're finding supply chain partners and they're building those over and over again. They are partnering and standardizing on lots of those things. Then you've got this big group called the vertical integrators, right? These are how many of you know that all the general contractors fab now, basically? Do you guys know that? They're fabbing. Do you think they think that we're better at it than they are? When I say we, I mean the prefab guys that grew up in the modular business. Do you think they think we're better contractors than they are? Not really, right? And not many of us are better manufacturers, to be honest. Like, we haven't applied those manufacturing techniques to at least say we're better manufacturers, right? We all grew up sort of building construction under a roof in this industry, in the industry of the modular guys as part of the ecosystem, right? These vertical integrators are now, there's an article out today about Shop, right? I've worked with those guys. They now have a whole, I think it's called Assembly or something. I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, but they have a whole division now just doing prefabrication architecture. You've got architects like Canon that open up fab shops now. You've got every general contractor, literally from DPR to, you know, Bolt, to making modules. So let me ask you, you're a client. You're going to go with Bolt's modular stuff or some quirky guy you never heard of that's never worked in that state before? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? Who are you going with? The contractor that's been doing construction for 100 years that now all of a sudden does modular, or some quirky modular company that came up 3 years ago that doesn't even have bonding capacity? Who are you going to pick? That's why I said, come up with your exit strategy if you got something really good. And then you've got the super subs. I told you you're going to be uncomfortable. I'm really sorry if you're an investor in one of these companies, but I'm giving you a chance. I'm giving you some time. You got a little time to make some money. Then you got the super subs. You got guys that are out there that are trying to now become catalog driven designs, productizing, standardizing, and they've got lots of skills that they've been growing in their, particularly in how they're growing their business. They realized long ago they were losing labor, so they started using it really effectively and putting money into fab. These are the guys that I typically talk to. And there's a vice on our ecosystem right now. Everyone's like, why is this all of a sudden happening? Like, I know I've been involved in this industry for 20 years, this, you know, the modular industry. And here's why. Serial owners are asking for it. Like, people that in my wildest dreams I thought I could never speak to, let alone work for, are like, we need your help. We gotta figure out how to prefabricate all these complicated things. I'm like, great. Governments are requiring it. People like Singapore, right? Everything they do is under the microscope. We all see, we're like, wow, how do we make sure the permits, you can't get them unless you have prefab? Or we look at things like the $3 billion school program that government's doing in the UK, and we're replicating that everywhere, right? Everyone's like, how do they get that? And then the cool part is, even though I don't love all the stories, these sexy hype projects, even if they're not really that true, like when I'm like, well, they didn't quite build that in 10 days, let's call it assembled, right? Like, it didn't start getting like the mods done that day and 10 days later they were done. We all know that that's not true. Like, but these stories do help us, right? And then you've got some contractors that have been recognizing value and manufacturers for many years. They don't pass that value up the chain to the generals or anybody else, because they're just doing it to survive and get more and more. That's why all those guys have, you know, like Aiden, you got a big boat called Change Order or anything like that? No, just kidding. That's why these general contractors, like, they don't know what these subs are doing. The subs have been getting good at this for so long, right? They're just great at fabbing. They are the new manufacturers, right? It's like those days are over of just like letting things happen and like trying to find nice labor. No, for 20 plus years, these MEP guys have been fabbing, right? Better than most of the manufacturing guys I know. They're in the, you know, the modular space, and they have the trusted relationships. We have successful prefab guys like Blocks, and like, I hate to tell you this, like, you know, there are some of them out there that are successful, but again, these are sort of the smaller companies that are doing cool things that get on the news, but they're not going to change the world. They won't. As much as I love Christian, that he will say he's changing the world, I would say you're a part of it. But by yourself, you're too little. If a multi-billion-dollar company is too little to change the world, then certainly one small little, like, you know, pod company or a module company is too small to change the world. And, you know, we just have lowering barriers to adoption. Like, we're in a global economy now. We can go learn about stuff. You can come here and go to the meetings if you want to. I can go to things in China if I want to. And like, people move around. Like, guys I've known, I had a guy at Autodesk tell me about what they were doing with robotic welding. And I was like, he was telling me about his first job. And I was like, that was my factory. Actually. And I was like, what a small world. Like, came back, he's like, oh my God, that was your factory. So it's these groups on the sides of the vice are squeezing the general contractor and the architects, because these guys typically don't know how to, if they're not fabbing, they don't know how to integrate prefab, and these guys don't know how to design for it. And so they're like, what's my new role in the world? And what happens when you squeeze things is the lines between them get really pressurized tight and they blur. That's why everyone's changing their business models. They're trying to close the gap on the silo next to them and overtake them, right? And at least take control of it. And so these guys have a lot of money and a lot of control, and you will see them close the gaps between people. And you will see these serial owners sometimes going direct to subcontractors because they don't want to deal with this nonsense anymore. They want to go right to the guy that knows how to make it, right? And then you have COVID happen. And when COVID hits, even more pressure. And interestingly enough, I was on this thing at MEP Force where all the MEP subcontractors that are fabbing, and I was at this like meet and greet VIP thing, and they were all talking about the MEP subcontractors that were fabbing prior to COVID are all fine, and they're continuing to fab. And really, they haven't seen many drops in their volume because they were already fabbing. They didn't have to pivot, right? They're still getting work. They're still getting work out. They don't have any issues with on-site anymore because most of their work was done in the offsite fabrication shop anyway. So here's the part that you're not, not necessarily in control of, but, and there's a lot of controversy around this and why I really came to Autodesk. We have to move the make, which is the manufacturer and construction information, up into design, right? That's called DFMA. We have to do DFMA, and like, in order to do DFMA, it does not mean prefab, contrary to Lang O'Rourke and Love Ray O'Rourke and those guys, but it doesn't mean prefab. It actually comes from manufacturing, and it means ease of manufacturing, a method of design choices you make to make manufacturing easier, right? Optimizing someone's manufacturing process through your own design choices. In order to do that, you would need to know how they manufacture things, with what materials, not just their typical details, but what their supply chain runs off of and how and who their suppliers are for, pieces and parts of things they do, because you need to know how to design for those, right? This is see how it's getting complicated already. And then there's design for assembly. And not only do I need to know how they make things, I need to know how they're gonna wrap and ship and move and handle and unwrap and install that same piece and part. And so I'm gonna have to make my design choices to make that easier. So that might be in my top picking it and my bottom picking it. How am I doing? What kind of truck does it go on? Does it need support? How's that happening, right? So we've concatenated those to be DFMA. And they're both really in truth trying to reduce material and overhead and labor costs. Most importantly, they're trying to shorten the design cycle time. Like I said, if it takes you 5 times longer to design it and you can make it faster than anybody, you're still not ahead. You know what I mean? And we got to use standards to reduce costs. That's a big part of DFMA. And so think of it as a design methodology that enables and optimizes prefab through specific design choices they make, right? So many of you are in the business. It's like, I don't know, how do these mods stack? How do you make the connection? How do we finish this wall? These are all these things. And funny enough, I used to have a giant book at Coleman. It was like on paper. And I was like, this is my typical wall floor. This is my typical floor ceiling, right? We don't need to be on paper anymore. But DFMA principles are both generic and specific in nature. These are the generic ones I taught for many years, like design it once, use it many times, and use of advanced building products and safety and design. These are all great. You can embrace these and love them. Just like everyone's like, if architects would just embrace DFMA, we'd all have more prefab. That's not true. We'd have better buildings. They'd be more consistent. They would probably be designed a little bit more, with more clarity, but it wouldn't necessarily get us more prefab because you have to understand that there are very element specific instructions in DFMA. Like some of them I just went over with you, right? So if you think about this very simple building with these simple prefabricated elements, these are particular instructions you need to know based on a particular element and even the proprietary rules of that manufacturer that makes that element. And people make more than one thing, right? So if you take like this precast wall panel, this is a true story at Autodesk University last year, which by the way is free this year. It's free, AU. Make sure you sign up for it. You will never, I don't want to say never, but like what a great opportunity if you can go to AU for free. Make sure you sign up. I don't even know how else to sell that other than free. But if you think about that precast wall panel, if you multiply it by the 55 different DFMA and the DFM and 10 DFA principles, things like don't put the window any closer to the corner because the structural integrity, and don't put my conduit boxes here, and don't put all these really minutia details. And you multiply that by the number of elements in building, and then you multiply that by the number of people that could potentially make those systems. I don't know any architect in the world that could actually understand all of those rules to make those things. And so what's our answer been? A shout out, because we're a small group. What's our answer been on how to understand DFMA? What do we tell people in our space all the time? We say, well, in order to fix that, you need to get the person. And what's the next thing they say? Anybody? Shout it out. Take yourself off mute, or what do we say? Do you know? We go, get that person up to the front of the process, right? Go get Aiden Kavanaugh up with the architect to sit next to him. Go get, I don't care, XYZ Modular Company to go sit with the architects, and you design it the way we tell you. That's like basically doing things by hand. I don't know many things in life that we do by hand anymore. Like, I'm surely very smart at prefabrication. I'm 49. I would like to retire at some point. Getting me to the front of the process at some point is not possible. I would like what I know in my head to be enabled by software where we could apply machine learning and AI to it, and it would be way smarter than I could ever be, right? If you have those, if I put those 45 DFM and 10 DFMA instructions into AI and machine learning, and I put a bunch of other people's, surely I'm able to enable, better choices that are made using DFMA principles than I can make myself, right? We're not doing that. Our answer at the, I was going to say dumb, but like our dumb answer is like, just get that person up to the front of the process and they'll fix it all. And I'm like, I feel like in every other industry in the world, we would never say, just put the person up front who's really smart and like, you'll get a better car, or just put, I'm like, what, really? Like, I feel like there's like computers that are way smarter. That's why I came to Autodesk. Also, I think this whole notion of the circular economy, we are really not utilizing to our benefit in our space. So like, it's not just about DFMA, but I started using DR years ago. Like, it's for disassembly and reuse as well. It's to understand that I could reuse pieces and parts. Personally, I said for years, I think the notion of the 50-year plus lifespan building, that test that I had to take for my own modules, and I used to tout from the ceiling, like, our modules are certified 50-year plus lifespan buildings. Is that a good thing anymore? I like look around and I'm like, my phone I don't want for 50 years. There's way better tech coming out. I'm pissed when I buy it and like next week there's a new one. Like, you know what I mean? Like, our homes and everything, there's a lot of plug and play technology I would like to upgrade all the time. And like this notion of the, sort of like the systems that are embedded and woven into the fabric of these, but it's just wrong. I just want it to be separated and decoupled so I can pull it out and put a new one back in. I can scale the capacity of whatever I have. I can swap technology out. And by the way, also good for the economy, and also good for the environment and our industry and our society and all these other reasons. There's like 4 different quadrants of sustainability that I talk about when we talk about it, but there's a good reason for this, right? So this is the sad, scary news if you're a quirky manufacturer in the business right now. The MEP subcontractors are eating your lunch. They are leading the way, right? And why? Well, because prefab's more than this box. And we only love to talk about these boxes, especially when they're empty boxes, like when they're housing or hospitality. And we're like, look at these cool boxes we stack. And in reality, it's a very fragmented, very difficult industry, the housing market. And yeah, there's a need. I'm not saying there isn't, but we love to ship air in that for some weird reason. Like everyone's like, let's ship all this air. And I'm like, it doesn't go very far. But in reality, this is where all the money is spent on prefab. What do they have in common? Say it with me. They are the heavy MEP integrated projects, right? The complexity is there. And instead, all we do is talk about this stuff. I'm like, man, if I see one more story about this stuff, I'm going to shoot myself. I'm like, I can't even stand it anymore. I'm like, this is like enough already. And by the way, none of these projects are doing that. They weren't even that great when they started. They were good, they were pioneering, but there's not much in them. You know what I mean? Like, there are far more interesting projects doing prefab that are highly complex, that are doing much more complex things, that are being repeated over and over again, that are touching way higher volume of money that we never really talk about or see because, I don't know, we're like obsessed with housing for some reason. It's where, yeah, we need more of it. That's true. But they don't necessarily need to be boxes. We might want to think about like not shipping expensive air, right? So at this point, by the way, in Dodge and MBI did this thing, I think MBI sponsored it. 2/3 of GCs and CMs and 3/4 of trade contractors in the last 3 years have seen multi-trade assemblies. I don't know a lot of guys in the quote unquote modular world that can make this. That's from an MEP subcontractor. How hard is it for him to make a house, like or an apartment? He's making a central utility plant, multi-story, hundreds of modules. It's just not that complicated. You know what I mean? Like, but the money is in this. When you ship this, you're not shipping much. There's not a lot of expensive air in here, right? Do you guys get that concept? Mm-hmm. But what's cool about it is this is becoming a standard, right? We're seeing this more and more, so much so that people are starting to pay attention. Not only that, unlike the quirky like modular companies, these guys are usually involved in design early in the MEP side because they're the only ones that really know how to do it almost at this point. Like, sort of one of the big wasteful things in our industry, in the industry of the MEP guys, is that a lot of the engineers make drawings that are conceptual, and guys that I know in the MEP space chuck them in the garbage and then redraw them, how they're actually going to design those systems. That's just wasteful. And so we pay for waste in our world because that's the role. And that like a lot of people don't want to give up and get paid on their value instead of their effort, right? We have to start getting paid on our value instead of our effort to remove waste out of the system. right? But it's happening because we've got heavy MEP. Like, I'm sorry, this stuff is so cool. I like live for this stuff. Like I call it pretty prefab. And like, I love getting it from my friends around the world because it's just so cool, right? And like, by the way, that's really the value. If you can remove all these really complicated things and build them concurrently off-site and assemble them on-site, you can't be beat as long as the design is standardized, right? And you can do that. So what's our strategy at Autodesk, right? And why did I come here? I gave up my own business to do this. I was a certified woman-owned business. I made great money. But at the end of the day, I was too little to make change. Even though I worked around the world, I was too little to make change. And so we've got to make DFMA and prefabrication just easier, point blank. That's it. Everyone's doing it. It's just got to be easier. And by the way, my funny thing with my MBI friends, like the ones I'm friends with, they'd be like, just get me up to the front of the process. Just get me up to the front of when I was a consultant. And I get them up to the front of the process and there'd be nothing on paper. And the client would say like, tell us what to do. And they'd be like, what do you mean tell you what to, like, give me a drawing so I can like modularize it. And I was like, wait, what? Like, no, like we're just trying to do things right the first time. I don't want to chuck his thing in the garbage and make your thing. Like 99% of the guys that make prefab didn't know how to articulate the best possible DFMA principles to design with their system or their product, or here's how my product works, or they just don't know. They heard from their boss and their boss's boss, you just got to get us in there early, get us in there early. And then if you get them in there early, they just didn't know what to say. Because they didn't have this delineation of like, what do we do when we just take somebody else's time versus if somebody just said start with the best possible nothing on paper scenario, right? We got to make it easier. So we've got to learn about our products and we've got to learn about the workflows that make this easier from concept all the way through completion, right? And we've got to connect that to a platform, meaning not just Autodesk product portfolio, but other people's products. And we got to make a real-time connection with the ecosystem in that. It has to be data-driven. It has to be a connected, multi-dimensional world that we live in. You've got to be able to communicate via the software platform, not just get the guy up front to go visit the guy in Akron, Ohio. And the third thing is we need to create a collaborative IC community. The fact that big companies still call me and ask me about stuff, I'm glad they do now at Autodesk because I have more resources now to create a collaborative community and a knowledge base and a place where all this can live and live on past me, knock wood, is here. And so that's part of our strategy so that you can come, the guys that are using our software and working in our space and in our ecosystem, and get help. Because it can't just be like, go talk to that guy and get him up front in your process. There's got to be more help than that. We need more case studies. We need more workflows. We need more understanding of who's got the best software filling in these gaps of these things that are happening. Because like I said, there's no one product that makes it happen. It's the connection between these products that are here and the pathways that it takes that makes this easier, right? It's just think about like things that are like your DNA. You know, piping has very different DNA and functional needs in software than does precast, right? So it makes sense that there would not be one answer, right? There's got to be an answer of how we tie this together and create a connectivity. And so like one of the things we're doing, and I bring this out to you as a call to action, is we're mapping out some ideal pathways. And that means we're talking to personas around the world and we're asking them like, how do you best design for these bathroom pods? And what are you doing with this MEP rack? And like, well, how does it get conceptualized? And then what do you do with it next? And who gets it after that? And how do you procure it? And how does it get put in place? And how do we follow that? And understand the ideal workflow and the value mapping. And then we can attach tech to it and the right tech to do it. But it's like, what's the right process? And then we can attach tech, right? So here's the most important thing I want to get across to you, besides the other slide I said was the second most. This is the most important thing coming up. Ready? Get ready. We have to stop making snowflakes. How many of you, be honest, make snowflakes? One-offs. Like you never made it before, you'll probably never make it again, but you got it, this client, even if they want 100 snowflakes right now, but it's not something you ever did before. That's a snowflake, Andrew. Everybody makes, even I make snowflakes, right? Everyone makes snowflakes, right? Thanks, Devin. The problem is this. You can't really get good at stuff unless you productize things. Right? You're in this space down here right now. You're like doing initial ad hoc and you kind of sometimes repeat it. That's why people got it sort of like, I've done it before, we're doing it again, or we have a lot of them this time, right? But even though they don't, not really what we make, right? That's a project mindset. And just if you look at the expectations on that to the right, it's like you wish that that's transformational, but in reality, it's kind of worse than where we're at in conventional construction, because you've got to fix your production line every time. You've got to go back to your supply chain. You got to draw stuff that takes 5 times as long, like I said, right? In order to get really good and hit that mark of today and get transformational, you've got to define products, manage them, and optimize them. Let me give you a clue. Do you think if you go to Kohler generators, they will make you a 252.5 horsepower generator if you ask for it? No. They will not make you a 247. They will not make you a 253. I mean, I don't even think you could pay for it. I'm going to find out. I'm going to call my friend Nicole and be like, if I had infinite money, would you make me? I don't even think they would make it for you. It's so disruptive to their current supply chain and manufacturing process. You couldn't pay them enough to screw up everything else they're doing, right? We don't make many 250s because clients make stuff all the time that we don't make, and we're just happy to have the work, so we make it for them. Instead of going, no, Mr. Client, Mr. Architect, I have to find these products. Let me educate you up front so that you design from the inside out using my products, right? And like a 250, and understand the performance of that. We have to productize, because when you productize, you can actually connect that to the platform and unlock the power of things like generative design and gamification and you know, AI and machine learning. That's where you're going to get that. You need parameters set already to do that. And, you know, and then you can do things like the product that we have coming out right now that we're working on beta testing, which is using Inventor and Revit, where you can automate the shop drawing process if there's no CAD CAM capability with that right now, right? How many of you spend 1 million hours on shop drawings? It's like, if our drawing time takes 3 times as long because we now have very detailed production drawings, you can't get it done. It doesn't matter how fast you produce, right? It's like you need to have automation, and it needs to be connected to machine learning and AI, and it needs to be connected to the supply chain, right? So let me skip this. I doubled the slide for you, but I wanna make sure you get that. We have to productize. And in order to, when we get there, that's when you'll see people asking for products. It's sort of a chicken and egg thing. You got to make products. They've got to ask for products. We've got to enable products, and owners need to demand products, right? That's basically, I have a new slide coming out that looks just like that. What do you have to do? And point your finger at yourself. So if I left you with one thing, I think that's probably the most important thing before I take questions, if we have any. And I'm here as a resource, and I'll give you the super easiest way to work with me, and Aiden will tell you this, and so will Audrey. I like people first that are nice. Right? And like, secondly, I like people that are smart. And I always say smart people are people that are like, I know a lot about this. I know nothing about this. If I need to know about mechanical, I just called David the other day. I'm like, I need to know this. Like, I don't know this. Like, it's not my thing. And like, he'll answer for me, because if he doesn't know something, I will be the person that knows my part. You know, it's like, I like people that are nice and people that are smart. And like, if you know it, come out like a pit bull and tell me you know it, right? Like, I'm good with that. But I'm looking for people that want to be partners with us and that are nice and smart. How's that sound?
That sounds amazing.
Awesome.
You know, I'm really interested. I love the slide that you had about changing the mindset. And I know, like, a lot of the people that I work with that are in Finland or Japan or across from our country, they're all in that mindset.
Yes.
I just find it very hard. And are you guys finding that same complication? So is that really what Autodesk is really trying to achieve, is trying to change the mindset and bringing these companies together collectively to work together on your platform? And do they have that integration?
Yes, and yes, and yes.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly enough, if you're familiar with generative design, it's computational design, and there are templates within Revit which are multidimensional, right? Like these computational design, but the templates they came up with, I don't love the templates that are the standard. It basically is like, I think it's like, it's floor plans, it's window walls, and it's massing. It's like the 3 things you never want the architect to feel like he has no control over in some way, right? It's like, I always make a joke. I'm like, if it were fire stairs, risers, and interstitial spaces, they'd be like, let the computer make that for me, right? Like, they don't want to make fire stairs. So it's like, we have to productize so that they can set the parameters of these, you know, using things like generative design, so they can actually spend their amazing architecture mindset on the stuff that isn't productized, right? On the stuff that is truly like artistic and makes these buildings beautiful and user experience. The problem is that we let them use the example of the thing they want to give up least when we say we should productize. And it's like, no, I want you to, I always use the Mexican restaurant as my example. I'm like, there's 100 things on a menu in Mexican food. If you go to I love Mexican food. So like, there's like 100 things on the menu. Here's the reality of Mexican food. In the back, there's beans, meat, cheese, avocado, rice, sour cream, and tortillas. That's it, right? Pretty much like 80% of that is what's in every dish. It's just that chef is a masterful at like figuring out what combination of those 7 things makes the best dish. And because he only has 7 things that he has to buy and procure and chop the same way, and he spends a lot of his time doing the mole sauce that you cannot live without, or the enchilada sauce that like is like only he can make, right? And when I tell my architect friends that, then they get it. They're like, yeah, I want to make mole sauce. Who wants to like chop avocado, right? Nobody wants to do that. So we have it. And yes, the problem is like, and then architects like this, I would put more products in, but like people need to give me products to like design around, right? And the guys that like make products are like, I would make products, but like they need to use them. And I'm like, okay, let's like, you know, the like, what's that game, Chicken? Let's just start making stuff. You know, people are, they're productizing and they're getting ready. If you're a supply chain partner, you better start productizing now, because this is happening. It's happening now. The world of the product is, the rise of these like, you know, products is happening. So.
Well, and I think it's interesting when you're talking specifically, and I'd love Fading West or Jason Carter to kind of jump into this conversation, is, you know, we're creating all these new factories, right? We've had factories for 30 years in Volumetric, and that's really been the offsite discussion, right? But I mean, you have these relationships that you've been talking to overseas, and I think that's, Amy, why all this integration has always happened for you.
Yes.
But for me, I've only been in modular for 3 years, right? And so I started in the building side because that's the thing that's closest to what I can connect with.
Right.
And now I'm kind of expanding into these other areas. You know, Jason Carter, he, you know, does consulting for factories, and really it's the integration of the factories and knowing those partners and what things we can bring in. Like, I love your idea of being able to do multifamily and bring in these other components. I mean, even Charlie, what are you seeing when, you know, Charlie is actually designing and developing his factory? What kind of integrated partners are you bringing on board to do this?
You know, for us, we got into this because we're trying to solve a housing crisis as opposed to revolutionize construction. And so everything that we've looked at is what are the barriers that keep people from being able to afford homes, and we target kind of the 80 to 100% AMI. And so we've worked backwards from that question, and really it's, my background is manufacturing, so I come at it from a manufacturing lead standpoint. And the integration is just stealing every great idea from every supplier or partner that we can find, and then applying those to eliminate the waste in the system. And so this is a really interesting question for us, is what are the technology enablers that are coming on that would allow the elimination of waste in a big part of the process that we haven't really focused on yet.
Yeah.
And that's the creating of the front end. We're going to try to drive a lot of our own developments. And so the ability to pick our own product is like, it's like nirvana. It's not arguing with a different architect. We want our own architects on our own staff designing with our products.
And what's your company? It's Fading West?
Fading West, yes.
Okay. But you do realize what, and I'm not picking on you, you do realize that's what Katera said, that's what Graystar says, that's what they're like, I'm going to eat my own lunch, it's going to be all my own stuff, which is great. I want you to succeed, by the way. I'm rooting for you. So what the things are that you have to consider are this. One, you have to collaborate with external stakeholders no matter what, unless you're going to like do every single thing. Like you just said, you're going to be an integrator, right? Like you don't necessarily need to make everything, but you want to be the integrator of the best things that are out there. You need software that crosses over the design to construction and manufacturing phases, that stakeholders can stay connected with functional content, right? Not just file sharing, but functional content. And so I can tell you at Autodesk, we are really focused on not just moving giant models from one place to another, but being able to dissect pieces and parts out of that model and use it, change it, put it back up in the cloud, move it to the next place, and have other people talking about how to do that, right? So if you look at our Construct Twin stuff, that's not about as-built. That's about stakeholders participating and creating and collaborating on information, right? So I think, look, the way that I look at it is like this. I'll give you 2 pieces of advice that have nothing to do with Autodesk other than my opinion. I've learned in life, and I'm older now, as I said, I'm 49. One, it's really hard to teach people new process and new software tools at the same time. It just is. It's like hard enough to change them, to get them to change their behavior or to swap out a software by themselves. Getting them to do both at the same time is pretty hard, right? So I am of the mindset, which is why I'm at Autodesk, because we have strength in design, right? Like a lot of people use the design products in the space. And I also know that we have great construction tools that are going to be connected to that, rather than somebody creating some disparate tool that doesn't really connect those things and doesn't allow for automation. It is not built on a platform like Forge, where you're going to be able to integrate even some of your own proprietary stuff or partner stuff, but it needs that baseline of that connectivity in that platform to really ultimately make things work. And that's going to be an evolution. And it's an evolution that started before I got here at Autodesk. So it's almost like, if you have to put I say it like this, if I were looking at one piece of software versus another for some function, right, disparate function that is not connected, it might score higher than the piece that we own even at Autodesk. But if it's not connected to anything upstream or downstream, it's like it's worthless in some ways, right? It's really good in parts, but it's like, if you can't connect it all together and you can't see the growth of how that's going to be enhanced over time, it's just a good piece of software for something cool today. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like in some ways, a lot of people don't recognize the functionality that's available and capable that we have, like in the world today, not just at Autodesk. But if you understand the process of what you're doing and you talk to smart people, and if you talk to me at Autodesk, I can help you figure out a strategy to say, like, we have these pieces of the puzzle, these ones we're missing. That's what that whole mapping of the pathways is. We have partners that fill these gaps. And by the way, these are some pain points we're either going to buy software, build software, or connect a partner or a competitor to it, because we don't do that part. You know what I mean? So your life is all about connecting things the easiest way possible for people to collaborate. Right? For the most part, if you're an integrator, I want to pick I'm putting my money on the horse that has the most parts and pieces of that are easiest, that are already adopted. If I own a business, I don't want to have to convince people to use other software and other things and other tools that they don't know how. It's like, let's speak French and do prefab at the same time. It's like, it's hard enough, isn't it? So, I mean, many of you speak French. I'm sorry. One of you guys is from Canada. Maybe you do, but I don't. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, and so Amy, one of the main drivers that we've seen, so we started out as developers and we're moving backwards into manufacturing. So, yes. But one of the biggest things we're seeing, specifically in the Rocky Mountain region, is just a lack of skilled labor. And I know anybody in construction complains of the same thing.
Yeah.
And I guess the question to you would be is the reason we focused, or the reason we picked Volumetric was because it eliminated the most obstacles to completion. As a product, it eliminated the most obstacles to completing the project, as opposed to panelized wall systems or pods or any of those that would still require the same scope of work and the same number of subs at the site. So I guess my question was, you like, though, the idea of going more pod, panelized, multi-trade assemblies.
I didn't say that. Don't misinterpret that. Many people think I'm like the module girl that is now anti-module. I think modules have a good place for when they're the right circumstances. Like if you're doing volumetric module and you're in Colorado and your geo is like 300 to 500 miles or 300 miles around your factory, your integration site, whatever that is, right? Great. Do I think you're going to be able to replicate shipping those to Africa from where you are in Colorado? No. Do I think you can even make it to Florida? Probably not. Maybe Colorado is a little south, more southern than we all think. We all think it's so far, but it's in the middle. But like, it doesn't go that far. It just doesn't.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, like I don't know all your parameters. It's the right solution, which is why it's on the continuum for something. And even in housing, it's the right solution. Like, look, we have an investment in Factory OS and the research that goes on in that volumetric wood home business, right? And San Francisco has some of the highest cost per square foot for that particular type of building in the world. Will it do well there? It could, because it has that weird anomaly. Like that could you sell that same house where it's Texas, where it's cheaper? Probably not. You won't ship it and get it there to Texas because you can't compete. It's the lower per square foot cost of that same building is a totally different, parameter. But so don't get me wrong. I like volumetric modules. If it's within a geo that makes sense and you highly productize the design and the installation, that needs to be like slicker than slick. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's got to be like so easy, almost configurator style, period, with standard pieces and parts, like to the nines. And like when people say, oh yeah, we do that, I'm like, is it? When I dig deeper, sometimes you're like, well, not, you like sort of like, Yeah, it should be like you can't buy it unless it's one of these three things, but they look different when you put them together.
Right. Okay. So one more question for you, Amy. What are your thoughts on 3D printing in construction?
I mean, I love it. I think it's great. I don't think its day is here yet. Like, again, like, you know, anything that really changes the way in which we do business in the ecosystem, it's tough. It is tough. You know why? Because you've got owners that don't necessarily want to take on risk. They're putting risk onto other people. And I always say, like, you know, pushing risk onto somebody else doesn't make risk go away. You still have risk. So it's like anytime there's something new, it's like you don't have a lot of directed owners yet. I think the more and more they get clarity and certainty on the processes and the data, that will just be another advanced building. That's why it's in there as, you know, additive manufacturing. It's just going to be, once you have the process and the data and the clarity, you'll just use that because it would be enabled by that. But for the moment, we're still trying to figure out how to get clarity around stuff we've been making for 100 years. You know what I mean? But I love it, and I want it to be here. And look, in Singapore, they're making pods out of it, and we do things like office buildings now, the biggest one. It's going to happen. All of it will happen. It just takes a little time. But I love it.
Does anybody else have any great questions for Amy? Now's your chance.
By the way, I will also take counter arguments. If you were like, that is complete horseshit, feel free to speak up. Like, I got no problem with that either.
I have one question. So I went to Autodesk University when I was getting going on the podcast, and just wanted to when I talk about breaking down the silos, I grew up in supply chain, so window and door supply. But when I went to Autodesk University, it's either they're like digital twins and total geeks, or I've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Do you think the digital twin is going to be actually come together and be a real thing?
I think digital twin, most people misunderstand the purpose, and there's a lot of different definitions for digital twin, right? So digital twin, the actual manufacturing definition of that, they haven't really been able to even apply it to a factory. It's really digital twins applied to pieces and parts in the manufacturing world, right? So think about, now we're going to take digital twin, we're going to make buildings out of it. I'm like, even the manufacturing guys that are really good at it, they only make things this big. You know what I mean? They can't even apply it to their own factories and like setting up their own equipment to make those little itty bitty parts, right? Comparatively. So I think, interestingly enough, some people now use the words digital twin because they want to own and say that they're manufacturing centric, but in reality, they've somehow, like, for some reason, people like grasped onto this concept that like digital twin is as-built, digital as-built. And like, that's what it is. And I'm like, well, not really. Like, that's a result of digital twin that you could get are these great these as-builts that you can use and have the data all there. But in reality, the cool part about, I think, what we're working on at Autodesk is it's not just about by the way, getting the as-builts is because the other processes are broken. And so we need this other thing to get something, like, see, it makes no sense, right? It's like, okay, let's make this thing because everything else is broken, some different thing. I think the cool part about digital twin, which is what we're doing at Autodesk, is not that we're not getting the result of the as-built, but we're focused a little bit more on the complexity of the data in the pieces and parts and how those come together in the information between stakeholders when you're in design and pre-construction and fabrication. And so it's not quite the digital twin definition that true manufacturers use for a piece, but it's an expanded definition of how does that now think this, I'm saying we're in prefab, how does that piece move up front, and how do we collaborate around that piece, and how does it become part of other pieces, and who collaborates on that information so that the result becomes this cool as-built, right? Now, I'm not in charge of digital construct twin at Autodesk, and we're part of that, you know, some other big initiatives, but I think that we often don't talk about it with the same, like my language, I say, so you know at least what I'm saying when I say assembly multi-trade. At least you don't have to agree with it, but you know what I mean. I don't think we've come to that in digital twin in the ecosystem so much. You've got a bunch of guys talking about it as if it all means the same thing, and it really doesn't. You know, does that help? However, here's the good news, Devin. So at Autodesk, we have a whole convergence group. I'm part of it, where we don't talk about things in the silo anymore. And, you know, we have our own silos like everybody else does, where somebody's like a design guy, someone's a construction guy, someone's a manufacturing guy. And those gaps are blurring and changing now because we've got people that need our help that are, we call them the convergence workflows or convergence technology or convergence clients. because that's what's happening, right? It's like not just convergence of manufacturing to construction, it's convergence of process and of product and of clients and of industries. And if you don't recognize the convergence in the story, you missed what's going on, right? You missed what happened, sort of. So that's good. And the fact is nothing changes unless you recognize that there needs to be change. And I can say that like the fact that we have people that are solely dedicated to convergence at Autodesk is a good thing. It's basically, I might as well call them the close the silo gappy people, right? Like in reality, that's what they're doing. These are like the silo killers, the silo hunters. I consider myself one of those, you know, it's good. They're coming. We're getting louder and louder. There are more of us. We get more and more help. We do. Look, this is not the biggest event I'll participate in this week, but it's important because I know some of the guys on here and I know they're smart and I want their voices. I want Audrey's voice. Like if we don't speak out and we're not courageous enough to do that and tell people you're going to be uncomfortable, we can't make change. And you're a man, who's the window manufacturer? Is that you're doing windows and doors? Is that you, Devin? Who's the one doing windows and doors or windows?
I own the company, but
You own the company.
Yeah.
So guess what?
But that's where it's back to the silos, right? I own a window and door company for 20 years that it's the same old way. And I keep saying it's not about the window and door products. Right. It's about the convergence, as you said.
Yes. So listen to what, this is so good for you, which is why I was trying to, who's the window guy? And that's you. I can't convince guys like Aiden to become manufacturers unless there's a benefit of you as a manufacturer within the platform. And currently, there's not enough of it, right? It's like if you can't have a direct connection with the people in the supply chain through content and direct connection, why make yourself into a manufacturer with product, right? So for you, what's really cool about what's going on in manufacturing, and if you read Srinath's last thing in HBS, like they're recognizing this manufacturing, that's why I said make manufacturing information, not prefab, manufacturers information like you, that information needs to get up front in design so that we can pick the right products and have a connection with you up front in the design process through really connected content. Right?
Well, it's every silo's intellectual property, right? So if I help Fading West with all their stuff, Anderson's just going to sell them direct. And that's back to the whole problem. You want to be in front, but you don't want to get left behind.
So there's a way, I just said this to one of my biggest electrical subcontractors in the world who spent, I don't know, $30 million prefabbing recently in his shop. He's like, well, I don't want to teach everybody how to do my product if I, standardize and create products and everybody can just copy me. And I was like, look, I don't know how this is made exactly. You know what I'm saying? Somebody will, but like when I need to integrate this into my life, I know the important parts. Right? Imagine me, the designer. I know what charger I need. I know what the parameters of my, battery life is going to. One day in the connected world, you will give them some of that information to make the decisions they need that are important for DFMA, but you don't need to give it all to them.
Right.
When I say productize, it doesn't mean like hand us over everything you have. And like, there's parts, by the way, do you think an architect knows everything inside of the Kohler generator and the alternator? And they don't know that. They just, right? Think of like that. They're not going to all of a sudden have your stuff everywhere. You just give them what you need in order to make your product.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I love that you say that because in reality, you're not wrong. Like if it's not good enough for manufacturers, it's not good enough to convince people to become manufacturers. Right? That's important to note. Who else? Anybody? This is a great conversation. I'm actually like, we're over time. I apologize, Audrey, but
Are you kidding? I love it. This is
okay. If anybody wants to know it.
Integrate. Aiden, did you have anything you wanted to ask, or Jason, or Tim?
Well, I'll just comment. Amy is always great watching you speak the language and understand manufacturing worldwide. But one of the challenges in the U.S., would you agree? I think I see is coding, just the codes and different building codes in multiple states as we open up factories and look at our distribution markets of, generally speaking, 600 miles is where we target, and most of them, we will stretch those markets, but codes are challenging as well. But I'm excited to see Autodesk really, over the last 5 years, really dive into the market. I mean, if you look at the major builders in the U.S., the 3 Cs, Champion, Clayton, Cavco, that build manufactured factories, they're all still on AutoCAD. And so I think with Revit out now and the technologies that are arriving on the market, everything from AutoVol, which is a fully automatic robotic engineering feat, but with the slightest change, those robots will spend 30x in control design change to get those robots to reprogram. And then the other thing I see challenging for us in the US is just the US. In Europe, people live differently as far as the designs. They're already smaller in design and they accept less materials. In the US, we have to have everything, right? It's been a challenge to create that commodity of a design.
You know, I think code gets solved by tech in some ways, not the interpretation of code, but code itself. Like, why do we
help that Autodesk? I mean, that's going to take an Autodesk to help change that with the IC.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, right? By the way,
paradigm now where we got to create a supply chain and we've got to have new factories, and we're still waiting on Autodesk and Revit, and our architects to really understand Revit, to really utilize Revit to make it worthwhile in the factory.
Look, at the end of the day, the technology, it's just like COVID. I'm going to tell it to you, and no one likes this. And I told this, Aiden will tell you, I said it to architects the other day on a worldwide call that he was on. I said, stop pointing your finger at everybody else. Point your finger at yourself. And like, the technology has existed. COVID happened, like a perfect example. I have a friend who owns a company. He's like, we were trying to go on, paperless for 3 years, even on like this DocuSign processes, and people were like, can't be done. COVID happened. He's like, in 3 days we were paperless. How is that human? It's not like the technology didn't exist for him to do that. It's just their behavior didn't change, right? And I said that about COVID now. This shift, this transformation of the new normal is not due to new tech. We didn't all of a sudden get new tech when COVID hit. It's the same old tech we've had. We just decided to change our behavior and use some of it, right? That's what it is, right? I'm going to write a whole paper about it in the sense that it's like, nobody invented something 3 days later. It didn't happen. It was here already. We just didn't want to use it, right? And like I said to Aiden, like in that meeting, there were architects on there going like, well, you need to know how to design these schools. And like, we should be like knowing what we designed in the past. And I was like, why do you need to know that? Why can't I just load that up into a computer and have the AI tell me the standard components like that were across the last 2,000 schools I did that could potentially be made into one? Right. Why do I have to know code for every little hamlet? Why can't I put the code into computer? And actually, last thing I'll tell you is this week alone, I had a client with a big general contractor. You want to laugh for my modular friends out there. He was like, Amy, did you know there's this thing called the Industrialized Building Code? And like, it's a different process to get your plan review done in like these states. And I was like, yeah, I used to be certified in like 36 states or whatever. And he was like, that's stupid. He's like, that's crazy. And I was like, yeah, you know what? We're not powerful enough to like have a voice to change that. It's good and we can use it for lots of things. But like when you guys have to start doing this and paying for label fees, that's when it'll change. Because they're going to be like, that's dumb. And they have big enough voices in their own states to make it a change. You're not going to piss off the biggest builder in the state. You won't.
We'll submit reviews to ICC and get feedback. We'll submit reviews to PFS and get completely different results.
Of course.
You have to build, you have to build the verticals in a multifamily project in Vail, Colorado to the 2015 IBC code, but yet we're building off-site using volumetric, and we have to be building to the 2018 code that's going to be inspected by the state of Colorado, that the local jurisdiction will be inspecting to a different code on the verticals down. So,
you know when that changes? When people who have money that donate to campaigns who vote are annoyed by it. And like, you're just like, I love to say, I'm going to get a t-shirt that says, you're just not big enough. Like, you're not, you know what I mean? Like, I hate to say it like that. Like, maybe I shouldn't get that. Maybe I shouldn't put those words on it exactly, but don't quote me on that, Aiden, anymore. You're just not big enough. I'm going to put that on my shirt.
And then I
mean, but wait, look, Aiden is not going to talk because I know he's like the strong silent type. Are you, Aiden? Say something. Like, talk one thing for me. Say one thing, which is that Australia actually standardized on their ductwork, right? In the country.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we've got a national standardized code. It's brilliant. So how do we get the parametrics in Inventor talking to Revit better? That's like, because we've already got parametrics in Inventor and we're trying to get it all done in Revit. But if we can get those two to interface, we can start doing this stuff right now.
Yes. Which we have, Aiden, now. So my beta test is just that. It's the parametric template from Inventor to Autodesk. There's actually about 3 different initiatives, mine being one in Autodesk and 2 others we're involved in, that are about the interconnectivity, not just between Revit Inventor and Revit, but Fusion and Revit. Like for smaller manufacturers. But Inventor currently, right now, I'm looking for beta testers for products, the people that have product parameters that you can literally, you can have all your stuff in Inventor. It will go into the model in Revit, pull out instances, like as an example, let's say it was a rack, right? And you have a rack that's productized, but in the models, it's just a rectangle and they said rack on it and it looks like this.
Yeah.
It will go into Revit. It'll pull those instances out. It'll bring them into Inventor. It will attach your product details that you've modeled in Inventor, and you'll hit a button. It'll automate the shop drawing process for you currently. There are more and more of those interconnectivities between truly multi-dimensional parametric modeling software that is manufacturing based at Autodesk to Revit. That's what you need. That's why none of these guys got off CAD, because it needs to do more for them.
Like there's so many like fan core units and racks. There's so many applications right now. Pump skids, standard pump skids.
Be my beta tester, Aiden.
Amy,
I'd love to.
as I look at all the different startup factories over the last few years, the factories I worked in my whole life with Berkshire and Clayton and Champions, and then the new startups like Charlie, Chubb, and the other accounts that we're working with, Factory OS, for example. And this was related to software. I just would like your opinion on, with Autodesk, and you mentioned Forge and the different applications that is all wraps around Autodesk, what would be your recommendation as a software suite? For example, Factory S, I believe, has maybe 6 different softwares to build their product. What would you recommend, or what is your list of best bets for these startups?
That's like saying, like, what's the best prefabrication situation for this application? So I'd have to know a whole bunch more, just so you know. But I will tell you that we're going to be doing, I don't want to say this out loud yet. There's parts I can't say out loud, but I definitely think we'll be doing some peer-to-peer sharing initiatives where you can gather some of the best practices around the world with some people that are doing things like you, and have some of that information amongst yourselves talking about it through Autodesk, like helping you facilitate those conversations. And that's important, right? Because it's like, again, like, it's more about like what, like I always have guys, they're like, they want to buy, please don't take this the wrong way. It might be a gender thing. I'm going to say a very gender politically incorrect thing. Like, men love to just buy stuff, like equipment and factories, and like do things before they even know what they want to make yet. I'm like, can we just figure out first what we're making, and then you can buy as much like toys and tools as we want? You know what I mean? Like, it's fine. I don't know if it's, I have lots of toys, by the way. I think I've like underneath here, by the way, I have lots of toys and stuff for construction. But I think it's like, sometimes we forget, it's like more important to figure out what it is you want to make before you buy space and equipment. Like, you might not need all that space. You might not need all that equipment. And so, and why would you do that before you even learn from some of the other mistakes others have made? Like, by the way, I owned a factory. I'll never own a factory ever again. I don't want to. And if I did, it would be the smallest freaking factory I could ever think of, with everything on wheels. You know what I mean? Like, everything can move around. I'm not going to make anything hard coded until I actually standardized and figured out exactly the best way to do it. And then I would just put brakes on those wheels so I could like park it there, but then like move it a little closer next time, you know, like, I don't know if necessarily, like, I can definitely tell you this. I think, you know, obviously Revit and AutoCAD are the strength in design that everyone, even if you don't want to, even if, I mean, a lot of people use it. I'm not allowed to say like the entirety of the world use it, like not everybody, but like a lot of people use CAD products like Revit and AutoCAD. And so like, if you use that for your basis, there are other things attached to that, like BIM 360 and the Autodesk Construction Cloud, but there's other manufacturing software we have at Autodesk as well, like Fusion, as I mentioned, and they're built on Forge. And I think it's more about, it's almost like less about the suite of product you pick at the moment, with thinking about the platform that you want to be on. It's like, are you an Apple person or are you Samsung? Like, you kind of have to think that first. That's like where we're at now. Does that make sense?
Sort of. I mean, I kind of have my favorites, but
I mean, there's a lot of cool little products out there. If you, I mean, PlanGrid's amazing. You want me to say that? I think it's great, but I think it's not going to solve. The problem is not one of these solves your problem by itself. Like, that's the answer.
Right.
And it won't. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be not so hard coded like that, right? It's supposed to be a platform where you can plug and play in different things and enable things that you need that somebody else might not need, but that same platform enables Aiden to do something he needs to do as well. So I think that's what's really exciting and different about it. That is, if you buy into the notion that Autodesk is a platform company that is focused on data and the future, and that they get that the world is converging, then we should just figure out the right things that you should have now. And by the way, you should work with us like Aiden and I are working together to figure out like, where's his pain point so that I can fix that next, right? And I know that in this group of clients, the MEP guys, I need to fix these next 3 things, right? In the housing market, I need to fix these next 2 things or 5 things because this is what's hurting them. And it's a different thing. You need something totally different than Aiden needs, right?
Yep.
But in order to know that, we have to work together hand in hand. So I'm very wary of anybody that's like, we know all the answers, even if they came out of the manufacturing sector. They don't. Like I will be very controversial and say, I know Autodesk platform has to work with some products that are currently competing with us in certain places head to head, or may even be better in something, you know? But the platform needs to enable that because you can't get people to swap like without understanding in totality the, you know, the platform. One day maybe they will because the connectivity is so much better with the thing you have versus somebody else. But, you know, it's very hard to get people. Look, we can't even get people off Excel right now.
No, I think all of my clients will have Autodesk. They're on Revit 2021.
Yeah.
There's just the BIMs and, you know, some structural, some engineering. There's just hurdles all amongst our stakeholders.
Agreed.
And I believe Autodesk will win all that and bring all this together. It's just when and how, and these are investments for the softwares for clients. And so, you know, they like to really dig into it all. And there's just not a real winner yet on the startups and the other softwares that are competing with you guys. Well,
again, like it's not about one sliver of a disparate product, but I will tell you this, the only way we're going to break our own silos down and the ecosystem silos down is by working hand in hand with partners like you, like Aiden, like Devin, to be like, okay, how does this actually work? How would you like it to work? What's really like, I know guys that in Revit are working with like equipment that can't get their G code for particular machines. I need to know that, like, so we can fix it. Right? Like, because no one's going to stop using the design software you're using at the moment, but I can certainly fix this connectivity issue between, you know, your machine and Revit. How's that? You know what I mean? Like we need to know that, and we need to work hand in hand with you guys to do that. So that's why I like nice people, because this is not easy.
Well, and people that want to have that conversation of change, right? I think just the discussion of being able to be open to it, because we don't have these conversations. It's so these old tools, right?
Yes.
And even in the building systems, it's like these 3 platforms or this 4th platform or this 5th platform.
Right.
And how does it integrate? And it's maybe not bringing everything together. I think the thing that makes it really exciting for us is that we are trying to evolve these building systems and trying to integrate people. So it's nice to see that there is a platform having those conversations, because to be honest with you, I don't know platforms that are like that. I mean, I can go to like a co-constructor or a builder trend, and now they're trying to integrate some of their builders, but it doesn't mean that they even want to share information with me.
Right.
That's the hardest thing.
Cindy, you just call me and link in with me, and I'll put you in the Inventor Revit. She just wrote me. So you know why it doesn't happen? Because all we keep saying is the marketing message of like, we're better, faster, and all you got to do is get us to the front, and boxes are the answer. That's not.
Right.
That's why I said, like, you're going to be uncomfortable. That's not the answer. We've been saying the wrong things, but we can start to talk about the right things. And by the way, boxes might be the answer, but they might not be. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So yeah, you gotta be honest about it. You
Absolutely. Know? Well, Amy, I am just amazed. So this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I can't ask for a better one. I think that it's always about the steps forward. It's great for me because I have people from all over that are finding me. And so this is really, it was so knowledgeable for me to actually have this conversation to understand more about Autodesk. So I'm profoundly and appreciative of all your time, because, you know, I know that you are so busy. So thank you.
Sorry, I will take any time for you, and especially like 100% AOC podcast, call me for sure, Devin. But like, seriously, guys, like, I'm here for you as a resource. That's really why I came, and I would do anything for Audrey because, again, nice and smart. Like, we got to help each other out. So
absolutely. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
To you and everyone else. I hope you guys all have a good night, and thank you.
Stay healthy.
Keep moving Autodesk. It's awesome.
Thank you.